if they're not willing to take you, which I have seen in companies, then hire new ones, because that's a mistake. The second point I mentioned was the frequency, this concept of always be validating. And I have a war story here, which Ujjwal wanted us to share. So this is a Scopus war story, and I have a couple of these. So we spent a lot of time on a product release, probably 6 or 8 months, trying to get this right. And we shipped the product. We did all the things that you do in a software company. Thought that we had done all those things right and shipped the product. And I thought, as a co-founder of the company, I would go out and visit customers as they unwrapped the new baby and to see what their reaction was. And this was not something that was required to do. We had done all the work already. We thought we had been talking with the customers, but by going out into the field and asking them questions, and in this particular case, and for the people who know Scopus, Scopus was a call center application for technical support people. So if you had a problem and you called 1-800-Cadence Design, the person that would answer that phone would interact with the Scopus software to solve your problem. And so I asked the VP of customer service at this one particular customer, and this was not something that I needed to do, but it occurred to me at the time, could I listen into the actual live customer service interactions that were going on? And so they got me a headset, and I sat in the call center, and calls came in. I switched between various technical support agents, and I discovered something very interesting and disheartening at the time, which was probably 30% of the calls that came in required interaction with the bugs database, not just the call database for the technical folks in the crowd. And that was something that the Scopus product didn't do. So I would not have discovered that if, one, I didn't have the initiative, and I don't say this out of arrogance in any way, just to make the point that I didn't need to go validate. We validated. We built the product the way the customers wanted it, but I decided to just go check one more time. And I definitely would not have gotten this extra input if I hadn't then pushed one more step and said, let me just actually listen in to see how these people are using my software. So the third point is this point about asking difficult questions, and so I'll continue with this one war story. So having discovered that fully 30% of the calls the Scopus product was really not able to handle fully, because there was no integration to the bug tracking system, which I know sounds very ancient to certain people in the room, but in 1991 there was no call tracking system, let alone a bug tracking system. At that moment, I asked if the VP of customer service and the VP of engineering were available, and there's things in your career you remember. I remember this meeting distinctly, and I sat down with the two of them and I explained what I had heard, and I asked a question that would not be a question you might ask if you're a vendor trying to keep the customer. And I explained that I thought 30% of the calls were happening this way, and that I thought this was a serious problem, that eventually they would throw my product out when they discovered this fact. And they looked at each other and they said, yeah, we would throw your product out. We hadn't realized that it was that high. That integration was on our list. And yes, you're right. Over the next coming months to a year, this is going to be a very, very important topic. So one thing led to another. We integrated the Scopus product with bug tracking. We went one step further, and we actually created our own bug tracking system, which had even tighter integration. And that combination product ended up being the competitive weapon for the company for the next 2 years. So I guess those 3 points are important. Don't delegate it. If you founded the company, you should always be asking yourself, do it all the time, and ask difficult questions like, why, if you were to throw my product out the door, what would be the reason? Don't be afraid to ask really, really difficult questions. Sometimes it takes that constant asking for the customer to actually tell you, because oftentimes they just don't want to deliver what they think might be bad news to the founder of the company. So you gotta pull it out of people sometimes. So that's my introductory comment.
That's excellent. I can really relate to those 3 messages you have. Now, Dave, you're a VC, a prominent one from what I understand, and people like me are shuffled into your office in 30-minute slots, and you either lean forward or not. So what can you tell us about some really great practices you've seen? You know, a couple of entrepreneurs who've come in, and what did they do that led you to say, yeah, this one on Series A?
Well, everybody has a different answer to that question. If you ask 10 VCs, you'd probably get 10 different answers. For me, and I think it's because of my switch into sales earlier in my career, and I've been in sales ever since, that hair on fire pain point, and I will also preface this answer by, and Ujjwal knows this, and we have different people on the panel. My background is enterprise software. I would not be a consumer software expert, but I would feel somewhat accomplished in the enterprise software field, so my answer will be from that perspective. So a CIO hair on fire pain point is the thing that gets my attention and my lean forward. So somebody comes in and says, my next step is to go talk to 10 CIOs or 10 customers, is a different reaction than somebody that comes in and says, here's what I learned from talking to 10 CIOs. It's not difficult to do. You find 10 CIOs, you do what you need to do, you get an appointment, you go see them, and that maybe back to that validation point, but that hair on fire pain point, which maybe sounds like a corny phrase, but we have a 75-person strong CIO advisory board at Sierra today. So we're talking to these people all the time. And the question that we ask is this in your 2012 budget? That's the question that we would ask today. Are you going to spend money on this problem in 2012? And we really want to get a yes to that question, and that's a lean forward moment.
So how many people have heard of the headache pill versus the vitamin analogy? What Dave likes is the headache pill. CIO's headache, and you have the cure for it. Great, thank you, Dave. That's very, very helpful. And as Dave started to hint, this validation thing can be quite different in consumer internet and digital media. There isn't the CIO to sit down with and drill into details and get to their pain points and all of that. And the dynamics of how you go about validating your idea can be quite different in the new world of digital media, consumer internet, etc. So fortunately, we have Aaron here with us, and I'll request him to go next and speaking on the same topic, talk about his experience and whatever he's chosen to highlight. And thank you, Dave, for those insights.
I want to take this a little bit beyond the whole concept of validating your idea and really approach it from the point of view that if you're in this room and you're an entrepreneur and you've got an idea, you've got a plan, and you're excited about starting a company, I've got news for you. Your plan is wrong. They all are in the consumer space. It's not so easy to just kind of go, this is the thing that consumers' hair is all on fire about. A lot of subtle things can lead to success or failure. And so for an entrepreneur, the question isn't how do I execute as well as possible on my plan, which is what most entrepreneurs probably spend the majority of their time thinking about. The question really should be, I have this wrong plan. Rather than focusing on executing as well as possible on the wrong plan, how can I get as quickly and cost effectively as possible to a right plan or something approximating a right plan? Very few companies really end up being highly successful in the consumer space with the plan that they started with. I mean, even Google is a pretty recent success story. Everyone remember that the way they were going to make money? They were going to make money selling enterprise search appliances to large corporations while they were giving away the consumer product for free. Didn't turn out that way, but it turned out okay. Microsoft was implementing interpreters for programming languages. So it's really a question of finding the right plan. And at Shopkick, we actually took this to an extreme. Maybe because we'd all done it a couple times before and had sort of arrived at a better formulation of this. Also, we spent some time with Randy Commissar, as one of the partners at Kleiner, who had done a lot of thinking about how to formulate this problem. And we really structured the company in the early days, not around here's our plan and here's how we're executing on it and here's how we're executing against plan, but rather around here's what we've learned and here are our hypotheses and here are the gaps in information. Here are the things that we need to figure out the answers to. So rather than approaching it from, okay, here's a plan, now how do we validate it, we kind of said, all right, we've got a general plan. It sounded good enough to all of us that we quit our jobs and went and did this, and it sounded good enough that Kleiner gave us $5 million to start with. So it probably sounds pretty good, but nonetheless it's wrong. So what we did is identified all of the things that would have to be true about the world for that plan to be successful. Just listed them out. And it's pretty instructive, actually. It's a long list when you come up with it, especially if you're doing something disruptive. And then we said, okay, there's a certain population of these things that are absolutely true. Not because we believe them. We were very disciplined about not allowing that to be a reason to classify something as true, but because there's a really good proof point for it, or a good proxy for it that makes it true in the real world. There may be a few things that are absolutely false. If there are, then you better change your plan, because that's not going to change. But then you're left with a population of things that may or may not be true. And your challenge as an entrepreneur is to figure out how to prove or disprove those hypotheses as quickly as you can. In our case, we couldn't do it by just launching a product and then doing A/B testing and seeing what sticks to the wall. Because we wanted to launch a product with some of the largest retailers in the country. These guys have a lot of brand equity. You can't just launch something that's garbage, with Macy's name on it, and then figure you can fix it up later. So what we did actually is we launched under a different name 3 different products that we designed specifically to test hypotheses that we had that our plan depended on. And some of these were very fundamental. For example, one of the questions we had when we started out, and now everyone knows the answer to it, but at the time they didn't, is will consumers actually take the smartphone out of their pocket and run an app while they're shopping? Now, if the answer to that had been no, we would have had some pretty serious replanning to do, because we were planning a mobile shopping app company. But it would have been good to know. That one was validated. Some others were disproven. We found that consumers really weren't interested in social deal sharing kinds of functionality. Shopping lists really weren't as ubiquitous as we thought they were going to be. So we took out a lot of features in the product in terms of our plan. We put in others. I wouldn't say we have the right product now, but we have something much closer to the right product for having gone through that disciplined process. And I think it was a really, really valuable one. We also built an experimentation framework before we even built our first product. So, we were building out pieces of infrastructure. Since we were talking about transitioning from engineers to entrepreneurs, I think it's worth going a little bit into the technology here. We were building out all the infrastructural pieces for whatever product we were going to build. All the database, the back-end services, the distributed computing technology, et cetera. We were building our platform no matter what. Now, some of the specific functionality we might end up throwing away, but we were making progress toward whatever we were ultimately going to build, unless it was aerospace, and that was important to us. We wanted also to have an experimentation framework in place which allows us to select users and have them be parts of experiments and quickly test hypotheses, and always think, how fast can we test? And instrument everything, get minute-to-minute feedback, so we can tell in real time whether people like something or not, and adjust the percentage of users who are exposed to it, either in positive or negative directions. We have rapid prototyping capabilities that allow us to prototype functionality within our mobile app as HTML5, which we push from the server, and then if it's good, then we'll actually implement it as native app functionality for everyone. Sometimes you can test stuff really cheaply. Someone just came up to me earlier today at this meeting over dinner, and had an interesting sounding idea. And my question was, will consumers sign up for it? I don't know. You can't assume these things. So my advice there was, why don't you advertise it? Spend a few bucks on Google AdWords, advertise a product as if it existed. Have a registration page for it, even though there's no product behind it, and see what your sign-up rate is. You can tell whether people want this product or not. That's an afternoon of work, and a few $100s on Google AdWords fees. So there are a lot of things you can do if you just think, how fast and how cheaply can I validate this, rather than spend months implementing it. And that's an approach that we took, which so far I think has served us well.
Fascinating, different approach for digital media and consumer stuff. Now, I have one follow-on question for you, which is, if you're going to use an approach like that, you obviously have a company where there's engineers, there's funding already to get that done. It's not a 2-3 person shop that does the activity that you described. And the uncertainty is high. All those approaches could have failed. You really don't know what consumers will like. So how do you manage your board, your investors, your employees, their morale, knowing that, you know, you're rolling the dice?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think a lot of people worry a little too much. This is my own personal perspective about managing their board and managing their, you know, what their employees think and so on. You know, we've practiced complete transparency all the way through. Our early board presentations weren't structured around execution against plan. They were structured around our learnings, and that's the way that we presented it with them. If your board isn't bought into the way you're managing your company, then you have a more fundamental problem than how you're managing your board. So I think that's very important. And similarly, our employees, they were really excited about doing these experiments, about trying this stuff out. And you know, we spent a lot of time in rooms with everyone in the company, which was, you know, only 6 people or so at the time. You know, thinking about what we could experiment with and really, you know, forcing each other to be very disciplined about, you know, what we really had learned and what we really hadn't learned. And this was a really valuable process, and I think that you gain a lot of trust also that way, because you know, people want to feel like they know the real situation and they're really participating in it, and that you're all in it together. So I think transparency is really the only way to go there.
Dave, you?
A counter to that, Aaron, I guess it depends a little bit on the percentage of things that fail versus succeed. For instance, and this is all in a room, so I guess what's said here stays here, but at Zoom Systems, for instance, which is this vending machine company, which they don't want me to use the word vending machine, but it's easy because everybody knows what it is. We tried things with different brands. We would get called, and we still get called, probably 10 or 15 times a month from some new brand that once sees the thing in the airport and the CEO says, I want to do that. And one of those, for instance, was jockey underwear, which the entire board is like, okay, I just don't see people buying underwear out of a vending machine in an airport, but
I guess if you don't have it in your bag.
I guess if you don't have it, or you're going to Vegas or something, I don't know what. So we tried many things, kind of along the lines of what you're saying, Aaron. One of them was jockey, and there was probably 10 or 12 different things that we tried. And maybe the other factor here, Aaron, is the degree of disruption that comes from the failure, because failure's not bad, but in this particular case, we would spend time with the customer, and we would have to develop the brand and develop what the machine looked like. We'd do some work to figure out what product's going to go in there, and when we shipped 6, we'd stick them in, they wouldn't work, and we'd pull them out. And you do that 6 or 7 or 8 times, and we actually did end up with a morale issue in the company. Even though we thought we were being as transparent as possible, there still was this murmur of, oh, every time we closed a new deal, it was, oh, it's going to be one of those where we send 6 and they come back. And we did have to spend some time on this morale issue, specifically explaining to people how important it was to test it. It took a little bit more effort in this particular case, probably because I think we failed more than we succeeded. And there was more work involved before the failure happened, so people thought that, you know, all that 3 months that they spent went down the tubes. And I think it is something to pay attention to. You I think, have a unique situation, Aaron, where you probably had more success than failures.
And it's a big difference. Having done 2 companies, one of each type, in the make and sell company, make no mistake, the board expects milestones and progress every board meeting. Whereas in the other kind of company, you can have board meetings around learnings, quote unquote. I wouldn't try that in a product company, a learnings-oriented board meeting. Anyhow, thank you very much for that, Aaron. Moving ahead, we'll go to Indu next and hear her story and the insights she would like to share.
Thank you. I think we heard from both experts here about great stories about validation. So I'll talk about 2 phases of what my learnings have been. One has been very early on. That is when we talked about validation. I run an enterprise software company that's on the cloud. We provide a cloud solution for manufacturing companies. So we help manufacturers track all their outsourced manufacturing activities and provide intelligence and predictive analytics. So what that means is it's a pretty big footprint, and we have to sell to pretty large customers. So I was very fascinated with the whole outsourced manufacturing and the whole supply chain and the disruptive technology that's needed in this enterprise space. The myth has always been that the large customers will not engage enterprise software unless you're, you're a big company and you can actually have a balance sheet and et cetera, et cetera. So what we did was we interviewed a lot of companies in the Valley, and we had a kind of a look and feel. We didn't go with PowerPoint presentation. We went with kind of the prototype. Didn't tell them it was a prototype, but kind of showed some of the screenshots and got them talking. They started saying, well, do you have these reports, or can it do this? Can it do that? And so we started going back in the night again and putting a few more things and going back with the next customer. So I think there was a lot of learning. I pretty much spent about the first 6 months doing that. And through that endeavor, we found one of the customers, which was Quantum Corporation, or one of the companies, who said, hey, we're looking for implementing one of these solutions, so can you come in and talk to us? And as soon as they got to know we were a small company, the first thing I heard was, sorry, we don't engage with anybody who's not a public company. And we said, well, if not anything, we're just going to be a learning, so why don't we give me some data and I'll show you how the product works. And here, we got a 65-page RFI, and what we did was we converted that everything into a product. So every feature and functionality that they asked for, of course, it was not a full-fledged product. It was done in Perl and MySQL database with 2 other people working in my dining room. But, this really differentiated. Now they could see. Now they got excited. They want us to go present to their executives, because that really made everybody proud that, the guys who were doing the RFI wanted to show off something that they could, instead of the RFI, something that would work. So through that, anyways, to make it a short story, we did win the deal. So we actually competed against many large companies, and we got our first $250,000. And this was not a penny had gone into the company. So that was the first learning I had. If you really have a good value proposition, the risk can be minimized. So when customers talk about risk, you can actually point them to value prop and minimize the risk. So that was my learning. So through that, I got so fascinated, I bootstrapped the company for the first 5 years before we got the funding. So we got our funding in 2005, and life was good because it was a nice economy at that point, and 08, 09, not so nice economy. So again, what we learned was we had to quickly maneuver. In 05, we had a lot of small customers, so we became, we turned profitable. We were catering to a lot of small customers, SMB market, less than $100 million company. But as you remember, in 08, 09, a lot of small companies, a lot of consolidation started happening, and also I would say we lost, because we are under recurring revenue, we're so